And so that's just a quick run through of some of the reasons why we care about reefs. The problem is that all of those things that we want from reefs, all those things that we get from reefs, are in danger right now around the world. And in order to understand that, I think it's worth taking a few minutes to understand how a coral reef works. Because the things that are causing reefs to decline are not that simple. This is not forest conservation where somebody's cutting the trees down with a chainsaw. It's not just, you can't just stop the chainsaw to protect the reef. You have to understand the biology of the system, because the kinds of things that are causing it to change are more subtle and more complicated than that. So I wanted to begin by taking a close look at a coral. And what I'm going to argue is that the corals themselves are actually the foundation of the reef. And when we think about conservation, we have to really focus our efforts on what's going on with these corals, because without the corals, it's game over for the reef. So here's a close-up of a coral during the daytime. As you may know, corals are animals. Some people just think they're slimy rocks, but they're more than that. They're animals. Animals that live on the bottom on the reef. And this is an animal, this is actually a bunch of individual animals. Each one of these discs is an individual polyp that's closed up during the day. Now what you might notice is that this has got a color to it that's sort of a mustardy brown color. That mustardy brown color is not the coral. The coral itself is clear. And if it was just the coral here, you'd actually see the white skeleton that's underneath it. But the coral does something that's absolutely amazing. And I think this is actually one of the coolest miracles of nature that I know of. That brown color is algae. It's very, very small individual cells of algae that the coral actually grows inside its body. Its body is transparent, and essentially what it's doing is cultivating crops. But the crops are growing inside the animal. And this is a really smart thing to do for corals, because corals tend to live in places that are very low in nutrients, with very clear water. There's not much around in the way of food. Corals have figured out that if they grow algae on the inside of their body, they can get food from that algae. And then that food feeds the coral, and the coral can grow. Now after it consumes that food and has waste products from that food, it gives those nutrients, which are the waste products, back to the algae, and the algae makes it into more food. And this is a closed system recycling of nutrients that goes on within the coral. And in an environment that's clear, in an environment that's low nutrient, where there's lots of sun, having a highly efficient process like that that's entirely internalized is a really, really smart idea. It means you can grow in essentially what's a desert from a nutrient standpoint. That's why we like coral reefs. The water's really clear. That's because there's almost no nutrients in the water.